Are women in sports being underpaid, or are the snowflakes taking over? I'm James the Greek.
I'm the DA.
David, we had a lot of commotion over the last few weeks when discussing Caitlyn Clark, the superstar from Iowa who became the first overall pick in the WNBA. And people went crazy when they found out that she's only making $75,000. So I'm going to defer to you first, Mr. Former Professional Athlete. Is it fair for Caitlyn Clark to be making $75,000?
All right, you're about you open like a giant question here. Is it fair for her to be making $75,000? Okay, so here you go. The highest paid player in the WNBA is $252,000 by Jackie Young of the Los Angeles Aces. I don't know who that is, but Jackie's making the most. That's pretty awesome for her, right? $252,000. So Caitlyn Clark is making roughly, what is that, about one quarter? Is that about right? About a little less than a quarter of that. You know, like Steph Curry's making $50 million. So somebody making a quarter of that is their first year walking in at $11 million, $12 million. I think that's incredibly fair. And the reason I say that is when you're comparing it to the numbers of the league, she hasn't established herself in that WNBA. She is an amazing college talent and the best player I've seen. And I love what she's done for the sport. It's actually exciting to watch her shoot because she shoots like Steph Curry. She is no Steph Curry, but she shoots like Steph Curry. She makes the game exciting like Steph Curry. And that's the thing that's changed the WNBA women's college basketball is that you have a player that almost perfectly mimics the NBA player. And same game style, same kind of little trash talk, but still clean, all that stuff. And she shoots from anywhere, and that's fun to see. So you're seeing this excitement. That's why people are paying attention. It's not that the WNBA has become this better game all of a sudden. It's that they've finally have had an athlete that fully mimics something we're watching in the NBA at the same shooting percentage, same talent, seeing to shoot from everywhere. They can never mimic what it's like under a basket. So shooting is the only thing that's been able to mimic it, and that's why it's so exciting. She's making the same percentage as she would be against the highest value player. Here's where everything kind of gets interesting. The WNBA went from $60 million in net revenue in 2022 to an estimated $180 to $200 million in revenue in 23. That is a massive jump. The collective bargaining agreement hasn't changed yet. So they're still bargaining under this first agreement when it was $60 million. Just like any other sport we've seen in the past, when you have a massive jump, the salaries can't jump yet until that collective bargaining agreement's changed because they still have caps, they still have problems, they have salary cap issues. They can't just all of a sudden pay her $400,000 when it doesn't work out. So when I did some math here, under the original agreement, an average NBA player. So now the NBA makes revenue $10 billion compared to $60 million. $10 billion, they make less than 1%, 0.096% of the revenue, the average player. The highest is Steph Curry. He's making about 0.5%. Okay? So WNBA, the average player under that 60 million is making 0.17%. So they're making, on average, actually more per the net revenue of the league. Now, when you add the $200 million in there, that number drastically drops, right? So they're making way less. And when you look at the highest paid player, Jackie Young, she's making 0.125 of that number. So she's making way less. But when you compare it to the $60 million, she's making 0.41%, and that's pretty in line with Steph. Right, so the numbers worked when it's $60 million. Now all of a sudden it's $200 million, and everything changes. So the answer is complicated. It's a complicated yes, because to the $60 million, absolutely she's making the correct amount. The $200 million, no, not at all. And that's the problem when she signed this contract. Once they change the collective bargaining agreement, her salaries are going to jump in the WNBA. Just wait. They're going to jump. But you can't compare it to the NBA until that number is nothing compared to the NBA. $200 million is a lot of money for any business. $10 billion is a monster. So until that jumps to $1 billion, until that jumps to $10 billion, you can't compare the salaries, but you can always compare the averages. And that's what it gets really interesting. And I think they're actually in line.
Have you ever seen the movie My Cousin Vinny?
Yes.
Okay, I feel like the judge right now.
That is a lucid, intelligent, well thought out objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Mr. Ardzma, that was a well thought out, well researched, highly articulated point. Overruled. This is the ultimate farce. Okay? Women's sports should not be treated anywhere near men's sports. The NBA still subsidizes the WNBA for $15 million a year. The WNBA has never made a profit in all those years, and if they didn't take money from the NBA, it wouldn't even exist. Let's stop pretending that they should be treated equal to men, because the difference between the men and the women is people actually watch the men. Nobody gives a damn and watches WNBA games. How many WNBA games have you watched from beginning to end? 0.
0.0.
Can you name me 5 players in the WNBA right now?
I can name you a couple. The problem is I do have a list like right here of the top salaries. I don't want to cheat, and I'm not going to use Jackie Young? I can't use that name. All right. We're going Sue Bird.
Okay, if you say so.
Cheryl Swoops. We're going to go Taurasi.
Mm-hmm.
I can't use like the girls that just got drafted.
Exactly. No more us.
You've got a great point. Now, the problem is people this year did start watching the WNBA. People did start attending. Their attendance jumped. Their net revenue, like I said, went from $60 to $200 million. That is a legit jump. And this is the first year that they will not be losing money. They will be bringing in a profit. So, yes, the league has been subsidized for years, and without a doubt, I've had no problem with it. And the problem is all these people think everything has automatically changed. Let it happen. Let that product continue. Because if Caitlyn Clark goes out and struggles and Angelise goes out and just becomes kind of like an average player, which I think she will be, then you're going to see no viewership lost. I do think they finally have a product that people are starting to believe in. But until you see change, until you see this a couple years down the line and that revenue is still high, I don't see anything changing. You can't compare the two, but you can compare averages.
So this is a very complex question because you're comparing the NBA to the WNBA. Then you're comparing women's sports to men's sports. So for me, WNBA versus NBA, okay, you're making a profit this year for the first time. Continue making a profit for a few more years. And then when you get to a point where you're comfortable enough to give people a raise, give them a raise. I'm a businessman. I own a business. If I'm losing money and somebody comes up to me and says, I need more money, I'm letting them go because I can't afford it. Why should these owners in the WNBA and the NBA donate money to women's sports? Because that's all it is. It's a donation.
Businesses all the time are subsidized by other businesses. It happens all the time. It happens in everything. Amazon was subsidized for years by other businesses. It happens. And that's the problem is we're viewing it as NBA versus WNBA. I'm not looking at it that way. Don't trust me. I've never been a big fan of WNBA by any means. I've never been a big fan of two exactly the same competing sports, and one is an incredibly different, better product than the other. The NBA is a much more exciting, much better product with much higher level athletes than the WNBA. So you have the same the same sport, and we're trying to compare them. I can't compare those. Now I can compare dollars and cents, and when one business starts to show that they're showing a profit, and when you have an entire different demographic that league is going for, and they're starting to tap into it huge. I mean, I watched Tim McGraw go on stage in a Caitlyn Clark jersey. right? Caitlyn Clark jerseys have sold out. Angela Reese jerseys are going to sell out. These things are starting to happen, which have never happened before. And yes, there was a tweet the other day about it, that her selling more than Dallas Cowboys. Completely not true, by the way. It was a joke. Not even remotely close. But the fact that these things are rolling, it is a steamrolling, and it is Caitlyn Clark effect by every, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But this is starting to show a profit. And yes, they're subsidized, but what that does is the NBA knew what they're doing. They're putting money into something that wasn't really a whole lot of money. And when you're talking about $10 billion, $15 million is nothing. But to build another product, and they built it. And now they can let that thing grow, and it's a monster. And it's going to become a massive, massive monster because now they're promoting the women's athletes, and you're seeing them a lot more. I'd never heard of I could care less about women's sports until I'm watching the LSU versus Iowa game. I'm watching it, and I was watching every single moment of it, and I even bet on it. I mean, are you kidding me? I bet on girls college basketball, and I'm watching every moment. I could care less about the bet when I'm watching it. I just want to watch Caitlyn Clark, and that's the effect that she's having.
Okay, let's flip the coin over, though. Let's talk about women's sports versus men's sports. Should women be paid the same amount as men?
No, but when you're talking about the same percentage, yes. So if a sport's making $10 billion and the athletes are making 0.1% of the revenue, if the women's sport's making $100 million, they should be paid 0.1% of that revenue. Or whatever it is, whatever it ends up being on when they're making money or not, like your revenue versus expense. I mean, when you figure out the net, pay off of that, or whatever it is, whatever that coins. I do believe they should be paid the same percentage off of what they bring in. If they're not bringing in, they're not getting paid a whole lot, and that's what their problem is. We're seeing the numbers, but nobody wants to realize the total shocking difference in people watching and seeing it. And this happened a couple years ago with the Women's World Cup. Women's versus the Men's World Cup, like two totally different monsters. But they're expecting the women to be paid the exact same as the men, and they end up getting it, which is an absolute joke to me. Absolute joke. And that's what will kill a men's team, because they're getting paid like a women's team compared to their rivals, compared to these great soccer organizations. They're getting paid the same as the women, but they're bringing in more money, and that to me is a problem across the board. But if the women's teams are actually bringing in more viewership, more sponsorship money, more across the board, they should be getting paid for it.
Absolutely, and I'm glad we're in agreement on this, because yes, if you're making the same amount of money, you should deserve to make as much as the men, if all things are equal. However, they're not equal. They're just not. And for all of you that say, oh, the women should be paid just as much, you're crazy, because Caitlyn Clark cannot play in the NBA. There is no woman in the Women's Lingerie Football League that can quarterback for the New York Jets. Well, actually, they might be able to quarterback for the New York Jets the way it's possible. But for every other position in all of football, there's not a single lingerie football player that can come into the NFL. There are no women who can throw 97 miles an hour. And if they can, let them play. But then, there shouldn't be any women's sports, there shouldn't be any men's sports, there shouldn't be any transgender sports, there should just be sports. But men and women are not equal. That's why anybody who's transgender goes into a female sport and dominates.
Pretty much across the board. Yes, and that's a problem. They're not equal because they're not bringing in the same amount of money. They're not, and I don't want to hear the argument that she should get paid the same. She's not getting the same type of thing. She can get her own endorsement deals on the side, and if you see the WNBA viewership pop up to NBA levels, and you're seeing sponsorship money, you're seeing skyboxes being sold out, you're seeing attendance go from 5,000 to, which is their average in 22, to 18,000, which is the NBA average, and their ticket prices goes from whatever to an NBA price. Hell yeah, pay the man. But until we're seeing that, shut up. Like, stop with this argument, because it is a stupid argument that's not based on fact.
Correct. And if you guys watching want to give us any comments and you want to tell us why we're wrong, please let me know, because I am dying to hear this argument.
Yeah. And he's wrong.
I'm never wrong.
All the time.
Name one time that I was wrong.
You're a Mets fan. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the like button. More likes equals more great content for you. And if you haven't, subscribe now